As the world transforms towards electronic economy, little awareness is being championed in regard to hazards like electronic waste. Join me, Sam Alukwago, as I host Sam Ejibua, an activist of electronic waste management, on the program Our Environment. In my presence is Mr. Sam Ejibua. A very good evening, sir. You're most welcome on the program Our Environment. Please say hello to the viewers.
Good evening, Salma, and good evening, viewers. Good to be in this program.
We're here to talk about electronic waste, and we would love to know, what is electronic waste?
Thank you so much. Electronic waste is not a new concept in environmental management. Electronic waste essentially refers to circuit-based residue or obsolete materials that are due for disposal or for recycling. And this can be computers that are out of use, phones that are out of use, and any other electronic gadgets that are obsolete and cannot be recycled anymore. These are what we refer to as electronic waste.
Tell us, what is the e-strategy policy or effect on the environment?
The effect of electronic waste on environment is enormous.
Yes.
The strategy currently adopted by government is to manage electronic waste rather than dispose it. Our disposal practices are not the best when you come to electronic waste. And it's because we mix electronic waste with solid waste and dump them together. And this is very hazardous to the environment. It is toxic to the environment because of the elements that come with electronic waste. And the strategy now is to make sure that electronic waste is managed separately within the defined collection points, so that the elements within the waste can be isolated for proper disposal or for recycling. And this is the practice I think the government, through Ministry of ICT, is trying to promote and adapt for better management.
Globally, how has e-electronic affected the environment?
Well, when you see the global trends right now, the volume of electronic waste is so enormous, up to about 250 million metric tons, and yet only less than 20% of that is properly managed. Now that tells you that the balance of up to about 80% is at large. And this is a risk to environment, it's a risk to nature, it's a risk to the air we breathe, and this predisposes us to risks of cancer and such toxicity that we are confronted.
Okay, what is your vision towards stopping this danger in our environment?
The youth are key players in handling electronics. Given that now education is being digitized, commerce is being digitized, governance is being digitized, so there will be need for electronic devices across the spectrum. Schools will need gadgets for educating the pupils and the students. Government will need gadgets for managing systems and processes. The youth have been at the center of all this because of their affinity to electronic gadgets. The question is, how are we prepared to manage the waste out of these gadgets that are going to flood our environment? And we would like to see the youth take center stage in properly managing electronic waste, not disposal. Our strategy is ensuring that everybody is aware of the dangers of electronic waste in this country before we go into the risks of the electronic waste.
What have you done on making awareness to the public in terms of e-waste campaign?
We haven't done much so far, but we started with participating and commemorating the Electronic Waste Management Day.
Yes.
And the reason why the Electronic Management Waste Day is important is that we see it as a launch pad for creating awareness. We would like to take this up with different stakeholders so that more awareness and sensitization is done at every level of our community, involving the different local government structures, involving schools and institutions, involving business entities that are trading in these electronics.
Mr. Ejibwa, do you think Uganda needs this?
Absolutely, Uganda needs this like any other country. Technology is a new norm. We can't avoid it.
Okay.
The challenge is we haven't prepared enough to manage waste that comes with electronics that we are attracting. The market is going towards electronics. Governance is going towards electronics. As I said, education is going towards electronics. We should devise means of managing this in the earliest possible time.
And how long do you think you will be prepared for this and for the public?
We are late in taking steps already. Government has taken initiatives, government has set up the legal framework and the policy instruments required, but action is slow, and we'd like to kickstart every process immediately by creating awareness through such media and informing the public about these dangers and going out to mobilize young people and all stakeholders to participate in creating this awareness for the good of our environment.
How are you ready to engage the youth, most especially?
We are very ready. Youth Social Work Association is a youth-focused organization. We have different approaches of dealing with the youth, and we will use all these approaches.
Like what approaches?
To make sure.
Like what approach?
Using games and sports, for example. The youth have a liking for things that engage their energies. Using entertainment, for instance. Using camps and adventures to make sure that they are able to come together and appreciate the need to deal with this situation we're facing.
How often are you willing to do this?
As regular as opportunity avails. Actually, I can use this opportunity to rally stakeholders. Say, don't wait. Let's come together and deal with this challenge that this country is facing. Other countries have taken steps, but we are still slow in acting, and we have no time to waste because consumption of electronics is not going down, it is going up.
What is your strategic location towards engaging the youth?
We will have multiple approaches of engaging the youth. There are school-going youth, there are out-of-school youth, there are youth in what we call the ghettos. We will use all of them to make sure that this message reaches the last person.
You talked about the government as one of the stakeholders.
We're looking at the Ministry of ICT as the principal agency, but of course within government structures we have the Bureau of Standards, which is a key actor. We have Uganda Revenue Authority, which should also be a very key actor. We will also engage the private sector actors because these electronics are traded by businesses and companies that deal in them. We also are looking to engaging the internet service providers because they provide access to the usage of these.
All those are other stakeholders.
These are all stakeholders that we want on board, let alone individuals and groups who we can use as a means of mobilization.
What other activities have you done to promote this awareness, most especially in our country, Uganda?
So far, we have been talking to potential stakeholders. We haven't taken any practical steps on ground. We have been talking to stakeholders. We have been thinking through as members of Youth Social Work Association on how best to approach stakeholders. And we will swing into action not very long from now.
Have you faced challenges so far?
Absolutely.
And what are those? What are some of those challenges?
The most immediate challenge is the lack of information in the community about electronic waste. People don't see the gadgets that we use as a potential hazard. They more look at them as the tool they need for their electronic services. However, other challenges also relate to the stakeholders themselves. Nobody is taking up responsibility so far, and we need to bring them on board so that we all appreciate the need to address this challenge.
What is your way forward and future expectation towards saving our environment?
Everybody should come on board. Absolutely, everybody needs to come on board, because you and I use electronic gadgets. We should take responsibility of properly managing their disposal. Besides what I have already mentioned, we also think as a way forward, we need to have regular engagement with different stakeholders. In one of our planning, we would like to have meetings with the Ministry of ICT and have on board agencies like Uganda Communications Commission, the National Environment Management Authority, and all these stakeholders, because these are policy holders in as far as waste management is concerned. And it's important to introduce electronic waste in the discussions around waste management. And NEMA as a stakeholder plays a very key role in that. Besides these engagements with government, it should be the interest of government to have all the private sector actors rallied to support this process. In our opinion, as a corporate social responsibility, because you are a seller of a gadget, it should interest you how that gadget is disposed or how that gadget is recycled. And there must be a way of properly managing that process.
That's true.
We breathe very toxic air when the electronic waste is burnt and exposed in our atmosphere.
Yes.
We drink toxic water when the elements of electronic waste are exposed in the water that we drink, or even in the fish that we eventually consume, because the environment in which the fish breeds becomes toxic. The crops that we grow, if this waste is contained within the soil texture where we grow our crops, or where we expose our skin, it affects us. And so many of the cancerous elements that we eventually witness are a result of some of these electronic waste that we are talking about. For example, when you see radioactive elements that are contained either in smoke alarms or in cathode ray tubes, these are things that are not supposed to be disposed without proper management, because they in themselves contain elements that are very, very dangerous to our environment. People who handle electronics do soldering using solder wires and all these gadgets that they use. Also for the formulation of PVC materials. These don't come without the dangers that pose to our environment. The phones we use, the battery, either has lithium, lead, or some of those elements that are used for making the battery. We have never asked ourselves where the batteries of our gadgets are disposed.
That's true.
And if these end up in soil, in water, or they are burnt, this is toxin that is exposed to the human environment, and it's making our environment very, very dangerous for habitation. These are some of the few examples that I think we need to be mindful about as stakeholders, but also as a country. We need to be keen on the dangers. There's a lot that needs to be done in terms of sharing information, and sharing information about so many examples of electronic waste that is at our disposal, but yet we are not properly managing their disposal. And the other danger, of course, is the lack of awareness is probably causing us to be a little careless. Because when you go to the waste disposal areas, you find so many young people scavenging in the waste.
Yes.
You don't know what elements they are exposed to. You don't know what risks you're putting their lives into. And for them, they are scavenging for food and sometimes plastics and some elements that they think
don't know what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing. This is very dangerous to our young generation. I have often asked myself, and I think there is need to do a study. I've asked myself, why are we having so many cancer cases in our hospitals this day? I have no absolute answer, but I am very sure it can be directly linked to electronic waste management. And this should be a concern. My appeal to government is this electronic waste concern should be taken up on a very serious note. Government should use its mandate to rally all stakeholders. Government should use its influence to communicate information about electronic waste. Government should use its regulatory function to regulate how electronic waste is managed. There is a collection center, one collection center that I know of in Uganda, but electronic waste is available in the entire country. When shall we have this waste to its designated location? When will the person in Karamoja deliver the waste in Kampala? There is need to set up collection centers of electronic waste across the country. And this should be the responsibility of government, the responsibility of agencies of government, including NEMA, Ministry of ICT, and Uganda Communications Commission, and all institutions mandated to oversee the use of electronics and the management of electronic waste.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ejibua. Your last remarks to the public.
My last message to everybody is, let's take responsibility to make our environment clean. Nobody is going to make our environment cleaner than our own effort in ensuring we live in a safe and clean environment. Let's take responsibility for our health. COVID is real. Observe SOPs, take precaution, and live a healthy life, because we need a healthy country so that we can all prosper.
All right, thank you so much. And if we don't,
then we should be ready to deal with bigger consequences.
Like what?
Bigger consequences of a very toxic environment that we live in. We should be ready to pay the huge cost of dealing with the medical consequence and medical cost of a contaminated environment. We should be ready to seek efforts and very expensive costs to reverse the process of a contaminated environment as a result of electronic waste. And this is not something we should wait to do. This is something we can avoid at the onset.
Starting from today.
Starting now.
Now.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ugandans, we should all join efforts to control electronic waste disposal so that our environment remains safe in our communities. Otherwise, remember to go for vaccination and observe the SOPs. Stay safe. I am Sama Lukwago.
deposit money onto your Airtel Money account. Reactivate your Airtel Money account with a deposit of a minimum of 1,000 shillings and get 10 minutes free Airtel to Airtel calls valid for 24 hours. Offer is applicable for a one-time transaction. Terms and conditions apply.